Hi, I'm Anne-Marie from Brambleberry and SoapQueen.com. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm going to be showing you how to make a rebatch soap with wildflowers on top. So you might be wondering, what's the difference between cold process soap and rebatch soap? And rebatch soap is cold process soap. It's cold process soap that's been shredded up into small bits to make it easily remeltable. One of the keys to having rebatch soap work each and every time is to have fresh rebatch soap. So at brambleberry.com, we make ours fresh weekly in-house. In order to get this to melt down smoothly and evenly, you'll need a heat source. So you can use a double boiler, a crock pot, or you can use direct on the stovetop, but you do have to watch it every single minute because it's pretty easy to burn this. Now you might be familiar with melt and pour soap and think that this is going to melt down into something that is pourable. It's never going to do that. It softens up, it turns into a gelatinous kind of oatmeal-y consistency, and that's about as thin as you're going to get it. So why make rebatch soap? Couple reasons. One, you can totally control the ingredients and have fresh and natural products every single time. You can use delicate essential oils that might be otherwise harmed by the cold process. Or you also might be getting ready for a craft show and you want something that you can sell next weekend. Rebatch soap does not require the traditional cure time that cold process soap does. If you let it sit for 4 to 6 weeks, it will evaporate out excess liquid and get harder, making it last longer in the shower, but you can still sell it almost in just a few days as soon as it's hard and not have any of those worries about pH. Before we get started, I need to prep my fragrance oil. Just like cold process soap, you want to weigh out your fragrance oil. In this case, I'm using, of course, a chemical resistant container. You never want to use plastic. And this is the daisy chain. It smells so good. I just love this fragrance. So I've got my heating element here and a really nice big pot. I know this looks like a lot. It actually melts down really small, about like half of this. What we're gonna do is just take about half of this and we're gonna put it into the bottom of this pot. And to help it melt down just a little bit more evenly and smoothly, I'm gonna add a little bit of distilled water. You don't wanna use tap water, right? Because tap water could have, things growing in it, or it could have extra heavy metals that lead to some rancidity or dreaded orange spots. So I've got about a couple more spoonfuls or handfuls to do before this is half in. And now this is in. And now I'm gonna put just about 1 to 2 ounces of water in. Remember, any water you put in has to evaporate out, right? Because the water is gonna make this whole all softer. So the more patient you can be with this melting process and use less water, the faster your soap is going to harden up and be a really long-lasting bar of soap in the shower. So I'm adding 1 to 2 ounces of water. And now I'm just going to wait for this to start melting down a little bit. While this is melting, I'm just gonna prep the flowers. So I'm just gonna move these out of the way. I'm keeping this close because I really do need to watch it and baby it. Since it's not in a double boiler maker and that it's directly on the heat, we don't want the soap to scorch. So I'm just gonna give this a quick stir. Nothing's happening yet. So let's go ahead and mix our flowers. These are beautiful jasmine flowers, cornflowers, rose petals, and of course the amazing calendula. And with this, there's no this is how much you have to use for any of it. I just kind of mix them together until I like the look of them. I love this coneflower so much. This blue stays gorgeous on the top of soap. Those rose petals go brown usually when they're inside of soap, but when they're sitting on top, they stay this beautiful pink. So they're a really good addition. And then our yellow here. And so now I kind of just am looking to see how I like this. Do I like this a lot or a little? And I really love this blue, so I'm just gonna add a little bit more blue. And I'm a sucker for these jasmine petals. These dry jasmine petals are so beautiful in the top of soap. And I'm pretty happy with this. So now I'm just going to put this to the side and keep babying my rebatch. Okay, now I'm just gonna check to see how this looks. And you can see that we're getting gloppier. That's good. What you're seeing, if you can see a little bit of steam rising, that's not the soap scorching, that's the water evaporating out. That's why we don't add all the water at the beginning, because we need it to actually mix in and not evaporate out. And so what I'm doing right now is just trying to get that water to incorporate in, trying to move some of the not melted shreds to the bottom. And this is looking really good. In another 1 to 2 minutes, I am going to put probably the rest, maybe the rest of the soap shreds in if I can fit them all in. You always want to have enough headspace so that you can move these around. And when the pot gets too full of the shreds, you can't always move it around easily. Now I'm using the Bramble Berry Luxury Rebatch that has some amazing butters in it that is just luxurious on your skin, but you can always make your own rebatch soap. So if you have a favorite recipe and you're like, I have a lot of busy things coming up this summer with craft shows, you can always make big blocks of your own favorite recipe and grate them down. We use an industrial grater at Brambleberry, but you can always hand grate. This is just a regular, normal kind of cheese shred grate. Another time that I go to rebatch isn't just when I'm looking to preserve a delicate essential oil or if I want something quick. Another time I use rebatch is often if I've made a batch of soap that didn't quite turn out perfectly, but I don't want to throw it away because of course it's great soap. So rebatch can also be an answer to that. So you can just grate that soap down, and the smaller the sizing, the faster it kind of melts down. So keep that in mind. If you're tempted to kind of do 1 by 1 cubes, it won't really melt down nearly as fast. So you can see that this is starting to get gelatinous. It's holding together. It looks pretty good. I still have a lot of soap shreds to put in though, so I need to put them in. And rebatch soap is always made from cold processed soap. There's kind of no other way to get it. So if you're thinking, is rebatch soap always all natural? It is always all natural. The only way that your soap recipe wouldn't be all natural is if you were using, say, a fragrance oil like I am, or if you start using some synthetic colorants. Otherwise, you can keep rebatch soap completely natural depending on your preferences. Okay, so now let's check this, and you'll notice that this is gloppy and gelatinous. Like it is definitely, it's not like melted, but this is as good as it's going to get. That's why it's so difficult to get like really complicated swirls with rebatch soap. It's beautiful, it's rustic, but you're not gonna get kind of that really beautiful, fine, wispy swirls with it because this is what you're working with. Now the final step is to add our fragrance oil. We didn't add it earlier because the temperature could really affect the fragrance oil and make it not smell as good. So I've turned my heat down to 1 or 2, which is kind of the low to low medium. And I'm just gonna add the fragrance oil and then I'm gonna carefully stir it in because it goes in like a normal liquid and then you just gently stir it in. You wanna make sure you get it fully incorporated in so none of it's sitting on the bottom of this kind of this hot plate or this hot stove area. So you really want to work quickly without splashing any of the fragrance oil on yourself. And then once it is fully mixed in, this is still extremely hot. It is far too hot to touch. So you're going to be glopping with a heat-safe spatula into your silicone mold. But before we do that, I am going to put some gloves on because that's going to protect my hands from the heat when I need to add in my flowers to the top of the soap because they need to be pressed in, and it's really hot to press your hands onto basically boiling soap. Now, since this is so hot, I'm definitely gonna put some gloves on because this on your hands, it really does kind of burn. You'll notice I wasn't really wearing any protection for my eyes or my hands this whole time. That's because we weren't working with sodium hydroxide. If you're at all concerned about splashing yourself with fragrance oil or anything, by all means, wear eye protection, but I didn't wear any this time because we weren't working with sodium hydroxide. I've got my silicone mold. And now I'm going to work extremely quickly just to glop, glop, glop. Glop. Don't worry, we will be tamping this down to make sure that we aren't having any air bubbles in there. But for now, we want to get this out as fast as we can because every second that this is exposed to air that is not heated, the colder it gets. And so just like lava, it forms kind of a thick crust. And if it gets a crust on top, guess what we won't be able to do? We won't be able to add our flowers to the top. So now I'm going to tap this down. And I can already see it's hardening on top. So I'm just going to kind of plop it, pat it down. And now I'm just going to add my flowers. And you really have to press in there. So just get in there. Just press, 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 and I also like to make sure that the soap is kind of smooth on the sides so that my edges are clean and crisp. And so now that this is all pressed in, we've got our flowers, there's nothing to do but wait. You have to wait 1 to 3 days before releasing this from the mold. If it doesn't release easily, just wait another few days. I made this ahead of time so that I could show you how it unmolds and show you how to cut it. Notice I've got my crinkle cutter and a regular non-serrated knife. And that's because they make dramatically different looks, and it's just a total personal preference thing. Like with all Brambleberry silicone molds, to unmold it, you pull gently away on the sides, and then you notice all the flowers that came off. I went a little overboard yesterday on the flowers. There we go. Came right out. Since we have the flowers on top, if we cut from the top down like this, what would happen is these flowers would drag down the, I think that's pretty. I'm leaving these here. The flowers would drag down the sides of the soap. So we want to cut sideways. So let's look at what a straight cut looks like. This is cutting beautifully. I love the texture. And this is what a straight cut looks like. So now I want to try the crinkle cutter. If I cut like this though, it's kind of weird. And since the lines are totally readily apparent anyways, since you're using a crinkle cutter, I just cut straight from the top. So I'm going to cut a tiny little piece off here so both sides are cut with a crinkle cutter. And then crinkle cut. I have to say, I like the crinkle cut a little bit better for this kind of rustic look. I think it looks beautiful. Okay, now that I've cut all of these because it was so satisfying to cut, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Soap Queen TV and learning how to make rebatch soap. Make sure on Instagram and Twitter that you hashtag your creations with hashtag BrambleOn so I can see what you're making. It's so inspiring to me and to everyone at Brambleberry. So thanks for watching, and until next time, bye.
I don't think you should fondle it as much. It's looking a little awkward.
I am breaking up the clumps. Okay, fine.